So if there have been any comments presented, we would know them by now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's live.
Great. We're now live on YouTube, and our chair, our interim chair, promoted from vice chair for the evening, is now here. So Vice Chair Chen, the meeting is yours if you're ready to call it to order.
Let's get started. So yeah, Lizzie, can we get a roll call?
Yes. Vice Chair Chen.
Present.
Committee Member Larson.
Here.
Committee Member Merchant.
Here.
Committee Member Peterson.
Here.
And Committee Member Woolley is absent. Chair Choi is no longer on the committee. Committee Member Breeding.
Here.
Great. Okay.
All right.
Chair Choi.
Yeah, so I think the next item is the approval of the minutes.
Yes. Does anyone have any comments on the minutes?
Yeah, I have just one. I think it would be good. I know this is sort of, it's not verbatim what we said, and you can always go and look at it, but it would be good under item 6.3, or wait a minute, no, under 6.4 to put in the actual, and I could send them to you, but the actual items that we want to get DD funding for the zero emission.
Okay.
We actually spend a lot of time counting, preferences and everything. I just think it would be good to document it.
Okay. I can document it. I have it. Yeah, I have notes on it. It was 6, 8, and 9. I remember were the winners, but yeah, I can document what each committee member said.
Well, I was thinking just if you document the ones that got the, highest vote, after polling, you could just say after polling everyone, it was the following items. And if you need them, I have them. I could just send them to you.
I have them too.
Okay.
Cool. So the way we can go about this is either you can trust staff to make the change and you can approve it with that change if everyone agrees, or I can bring the minutes back for approval at the next meeting. It's up to the committee how you want to approach it.
If there are no other comments, I'll make a motion to do the former.
Approve with change. Yeah. Approve.
Yeah, approve with change.
Yeah, I second that.
Does someone need to call for a vote? I don't remember.
Yes, I'm just recording the motion. 1 sec. Okay. Committee Member Breeding.
Aye.
Vice Chair Chen.
Aye.
Committee Member Larson.
Aye.
Committee Member Merchant.
Aye.
Committee Member Peterson.
Aye.
Great. Motion carries. Okay. Minutes approved with a minor edit.
Okie doke. That sounds good. So the next item on the agenda is public comment. So for any attendees that want to address the committee for items that aren't on the agenda, now would be the time to do so. And I believe the procedure for that is to raise your hand on Zoom and we will call on you. Now, I'm not seeing any attendees currently.
0 attendees, but you did the instructions for how to do it. Great. So we'll do that next time too. Yeah, no attendees, so no one with their hands
Right
raised.
along.
Sorry?
Oh, well, that's great. So I guess moving right along, the next item on the agenda.
Okay. Apologize, I might be having some Wi-Fi issues. So if you can't hear me, let me know and I can maybe turn my video off to help. So a first announcement, sustainability events and resources. I wanted to remind the committee and anyone who watches the recording of this Zoom webinar that stopfoodwaste.org is a great resource created by Stop Waste, which is our Alameda County Waste Management Authority. That is information on how to preserve foods, use foods that may be past their expiration date, and also to make the most out of your items that you buy from the grocery store to use in your kitchen. That's important because especially during the summer when a lot of fruits and vegetables are ripe, they can easily become overripe, and stopfoodwaste.org is a great resource for figuring out how to preserve those to make sure you're not wasting food. Similarly, Stop Waste has a website called lawntogarden.org, which is all about sheet mulching your lawn to turn it from a water guzzling lawn to a ideally native plant water smart garden. As I think everyone on this call is aware, we are in a stage 1 drought declared by East Bay Municipal Utilities District. ebmud.com has information on conserving water during the drought, and we will be sharing those resources in the e-news and on social media throughout the summer and likely fall. Those are sustainability events and resources. As we're in summer, things may be a little bit quiet for a couple months in anticipation of everyone going on vacation, but I will bring more back for next month. That's 4-1. Moving on to 4-2, update on recent and planned city council actions related to climate action. At the last city council meeting 2 weeks ago, the city council voted on the East Bay Community Energy default product. The city council agreed with the Climate Action Committee's recommendation, and as of January 1st, 2022, all residential and commercial industrial accounts in Albany will be opted up to Renewable 100, and all Bright Choice all Care FERA medical baseline customers will be opted into Bright Choice. There was no change to the municipal accounts, which have been receiving Renewable 100 for the last year or half a year, and they will continue to stay on that product for the foreseeable future. That is the recent city council action related to climate action. Committee Member Peterson?
So I was kind of curious, I had run into someone who was from a Southern California group that actually came up with and this was the whole CCA. It wasn't but city by city. The whole CCA had come up with a way to actually opt low income in to 100% sustainable also by kind of tweaking everyone else's rate to cover it. So if we wanted to pursue that with East Bay Community Energy, is that something we can pursue as a city, or is that even an option?
I think that would be something EBCE would have to develop on their own before we could tap into that resource. So that would maybe be something I can make a comment to staff, but I would recommend that either Committee Member Peterson, you, or other members of the committee who feel passionately about this, if you go to an EBCE board meeting and make a comment, that might be the best avenue for putting word in about that. I don't think we would have much influence just as a city in getting that.
Is Aaron the board member from Albany?
Yes.
Okay, I'll lobby with him. Great, thanks.
Great. Okay.
I'm up, right, Lizzie?
You're up.
Okay. I want to make sure I'm not cutting you off. So just to give you all a quick update on the state bills that you all recommended council support. So those were AB 1346, the one about leaf blowers and other garden equipment, and then also SB 612, which was about PCIA and energy costs. So both of those, as I think we mentioned last month, were approved by the council. And we sent those letters of support in, and both the bills are still doing well. They each passed their first respective house and are on to the next one and in the committee process. So They have yet to pass, but they're on their way.
Great. Thank you, Michelle.
Okie dokie. Is that all that we have for announcements?
Yes, and there's still no members of the public present, so no public comment.
Committee member Peterson?
I was just going to point out, last time we talked about this Senate Bill 1139, or actually it was an Assembly Bill, AB 1139, that, you know, we're trying to also get the City Council Act quickly on. That actually failed in the in the Assembly, which is yay. So we don't need to worry about that anymore for right now, but we will talk further. I think Michelle has something on net energy metering. So that's the next hurdle.
Great.
Okie doke. If we have nothing else on announcements, I don't believe we have any presentations for today. So we can move on to discussion and possible action on our discussion topics. So I believe the first one is the election of officers.
Yes. And so the reason that it's worded as election of officers instead of election of chair and vice chair is because Sarah Choi, who was our chair, has resigned from the committee to attend college. So Vice Chair Chen is currently the acting chair. Vice Chair, I want to make sure I'm wording this so it's not confusing. Technically this evening, because the only open spot is for chair, we only have to vote on a chair position. We're not going to do an election of a chair and vice chair because Vice Chair Chen is currently in the vice chair position. However, if Vice Chair Chen is nominated to be chair and wins that election, then we will have an open position for vice chair and we'll do a vice chair election. So does anyone have questions on that? Did that make sense? Okay, great. With that, I open it up to nominations for chair of the Climate Action Committee. Committee Member Peterson?
I nominate Vice Chair Chen for a position of chair.
I second that nomination.
Great. Any other nominations for chair? Okay. Prepare for a roll call vote. Voting on nominating Vice Chair Chen to be Chair Chen. Committee Member Breeding?
Yes.
Vice Chair Chen?
Yes.
Committee Member Larson?
Yes.
Committee Member Merchant?
Yes.
Committee Member Peterson?
Yes.
Motion carries. Vice Chair Chen becomes Chair Chen. Congratulations on your promotion. So now, as I confusingly explained, we will have a nomination for a vice chair. So now I open up the floor to nominations for vice chair, and I apologize, I should have clarified earlier that you're welcome to second a nomination if you'd like to emphasize that you nominate that person, but technically we don't need a second, so up to you how you want to do it. But nominees for vice chair. Committee Member Larson?
I nominate Member Merchant for vice chair.
Great. Other nominations? Great. And I apologize, Chair Chen, I forgot to ask if you wanted to be voted on. So I hope you did. And Committee Member Merchant, do you accept the nomination?
I accept. Thank you, Eric.
Okay.
I'd love to serve in that role.
Great. Okay. Voting on nominating Committee Member Merchant to be Vice Chair. Committee Member Breeding.
Yes.
Chair Chen.
Yes.
Committee Member Larson,
Yes.
Committee Member Merchant,
Yes.
Committee Member Peterson.
Yes.
Motion carries. Our new chair and vice chair are Chair Chen and Vice Chair Merchant. Congratulations.
Looks good on the resume.
Great.
Your climb to city government started here.
Mhm. Okay. Back to you, Chair Chen.
Okie doke. So the next item on the agenda is a proclamation of appreciation for our previous chair, Sarah Choi.
Yes. Pull that up. Okay. A proclamation of appreciation to Sarah Choi for her service on the Climate Action Committee. Whereas Sarah Choi was appointed by the Board of Education and began her service on the Climate Action Committee in November 2019. And whereas Sarah served as vice chair from October 2020 to January 2021. And whereas Sarah served as chair from October 2019 to May 2021. And whereas, as committee chair, Sarah successfully developed meeting agendas, led productive committee discussions, and ensured that all committee members engaged in meaningful discussion. And whereas, as an active Albany High student, Sarah offered invaluable youth perspective and insight to the Committee on Climate Action. And whereas, during her term of service, Sarah was influential in achieving the city's sustainability goals, including help in shaping the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, choosing default electricity products through East Bay Community Energy, and developing the Carbon-Free Albany platform. And whereas, Sarah is recognized by the committee for her leadership and thoughtfulness and for her commitment to making Albany a more environmentally responsible city. And now therefore be it resolved that the Climate Action Committee does express its appreciation to Sarah Choi for her service to the city of Albany and wishes her the best in her future endeavors. At this time, I will take a roll call vote to see if the committee would like to adopt this proclamation of appreciation for Sarah Choi. Okay. Committee member Breeding?
Aye.
Chair Chen?
Aye.
Committee member Larson?
Aye.
Vice Chair Merchant?
Yes.
Committee member Peterson?
Aye.
Motion carries. Great. Back to you, Chair Chen.
Yeah, and I don't believe Sarah Choi's in the audience here, but I do want to express a lot of appreciation for serving as vice chair with her. I think I learned a lot from the experience, and I really kind of appreciated seeing how she grew as a chair, and just having her voice in a lot of the planning sessions with staff was very, very, very useful. So yeah. Okie doke. So the next item on the agenda is a presentation from staff on the zero emissions transportation project analysis of multifamily electric vehicle charging. So I believe that maybe just to provide a little context on this item, in the previous climate action meeting, we discussed several different possibilities for using Measure DD funding towards electric for zero emission transportation. This was one of those options, and I believe this presentation is related to sort of the feasibility of it. So yeah, staff, take it away.
Yes, thank you, Chair Chen. That's a great introduction. As the chair said, yes, this is kind of an analysis an introductory analysis to one of these options that were picked as the top 3 last month. This presentation is to give you a sense of what a program like this might look like and what some of the different pieces of logistics are to think about as we consider it. And so I'm going to start off just with a short explanation of what some other similar programs look like to give some context. Most of the programs that I found that were working on charging for multifamily units were run by utilities of various kinds. There were quite a few programs similar to this. And they generally offered some sort of mix of partial funding for the chargers, evaluations, and technical assistance. Some had all three, some had, one or two of those. And they had a variety of rules for eligibility, some based on number of units, like only buildings with 10 plus units, and sometimes required a minimum number of chargers to be installed per project. And there were also several of these programs that were really focused on level 1 chargers. Those are the 120 volt chargers that, charge the car more slowly as a kind of less expensive way to increase access. So that was an interesting note. There were also a couple of city level programs, not a lot, and they were generally much smaller scale. So for instance, Santa Monica had a $1,000 rebate for someone who installed charging infrastructure. Long Beach and Burlington both had charger giveaways, so essentially paying for the cost of the equipment itself. And Burlington also put in a little bit of money towards the installation. They didn't really get into the technical assistance realm quite so much as the utility programs did. It was more of a monetary assistance. And in terms of what's going on here locally, there are 2 programs that are serving our jurisdiction already, but not maybe exactly what this pilot program would be doing. So PG&E they have a program that's currently at capacity. It's not accepting applications any longer. It was very, very, very popular and filled up very quickly. But it offered funding by the charger at different amounts depending on the charger type, as well as site evaluation, technical assistance, and also handling the construction. So it was kind of a all-encompassing program. And then EBCE is working on a program that is supposed to launch in the fall. And that's an incentive program to help support level 2 charging in shared parking spaces, both commercially and multifamily. And they are currently offering free technical assistance for affordable housing to kind of help them figure out if they would be eligible for this program when it begins. But they're expecting it to fill up very, very quickly as well. And they're also working on creating fast charging hubs near multifamily buildings as well. So that's kind of a picture of what's happening in this area with our utilities. And then I'm going to give you a picture of the costs. And as I'm sure you can imagine, these numbers are very much estimates. There are so many different factors that can go into the cost of a single charger. So this is to give a sense of scale, take it with some grains of salt. But generally speaking, a level 1 charger will cost somewhere from $2,000 to $5,000 for everything, the installation, the equipment, the whole deal. A level 2 charger that doesn't require major electrical upgrades is usually going to be somewhere between $4,000 and $10,000 per charger. And then if you do need major electrical upgrades, if there's not enough electrical capacity or something to that effect, you can usually go from $10,000 to $20,000 or even more in certain cases if you've got an old building or something going on. There are also multiple ways to reduce those costs. There's a federal tax rebate that's quite generous. It's 30% up to $30,000. That's for certain kinds of buildings, so it wouldn't necessarily apply to every building, but based on my limited tax knowledge, I think it would apply to many multifamilies. And then there are also the possibilities of forming partnerships with local agencies to reduce costs, purchasing equipment or services in bulk to bring the overall program cost down, and then also focusing on least expensive buildings where these things are easier to install And that's usually buildings that have more than 10 units that were built after 1980 and have parking garages. And to put that last bit into context, this is just a little graph with a small inventory of the multifamily buildings we have here in Albany. I won't go through all the numbers. Obviously, you can read them yourself, but we have over 250 multifamily buildings, but most of them are pretty small. The actual number of these larger 10 or 20 plus unit buildings is pretty limited. But as you can see from that total unit number, putting some chargers in several of these buildings could potentially reach a lot of people because there are so many people packed into a few large buildings. If we were trying to shoot for just those perfect buildings with the 10 plus units post 1980 parking garages, we'd be down to about 10 buildings, but still over 600 units. So potentially a pretty big reach in that sense. But again, just to give you some context there. In terms of the benefits of a potential pilot program, like I said, this could increase EV access and awareness for hundreds of tenants potentially, depending on what sort of buildings we would be able to put chargers into. And that could potentially lead to kind of a positive cycle where there's more demand for chargers and more demand for cars, EV cars, right? And then also there would be benefits for the city itself in terms of information and experience. There'd be a lot of data that would come with a program like this, staff and, maybe council would get experience with the kind of logistics that are involved in installing EV chargers, the technical aspects. We could form connections with organizations, partnerships, like I mentioned previously, and then also potentially testing out policy options to inform future policies down the line that might be all encompassing or larger scale. And finally, I just want to give a few kind of questions and possibilities here. We definitely don't need to try to answer these tonight, but this is sort of just to get your imagination going and to think through the kinds of issues we would want to sort through if we were to go ahead and try to design an actual pilot program. So I'll just read through these quickly. Can the city partner with organizations such as EDCE, PG&E, BayREN? How would the cost of the project be split between the city, the property owner, other potential partners? How might tenants be involved in this process? What kind of outreach could we do to increase EV ownership in these buildings? How would the electricity billing process work? Should landlords be able to profit from the charging? And can we connect this program to the city's other retrofit goals, like electrification or seismic retrofit? What might those connections look like? So as I said, these are just kind of to jog our imaginations a little bit. I'm happy to answer any questions. And I think in general, staff is just hoping to get some feedback from you all tonight to kind of guide us as we either look deeper into this project or maybe try to focus on a different one, depending on what you all think.
Hey, Michelle, do you know who provided the cost estimates there?
That was my research.
That was your, okay.
Yeah.
And that was geared towards installations at multifamily buildings, not necessarily single family residence, right?
Yes, that was geared towards existing multifamily buildings.
Okay.
Questions?
Chair Chen, if you want to call on people,
Yeah, that would be helpful. I can't see everyone on my screen.
your role as chair.
Sure. So committee member Peterson?
Yeah, so do we have any indication yet of potential budget or, the whole DD funds that I know there's been some back and forth with city staff, but they're still working on the budget, but do we know if they are going to, I guess we could just assume we're going to get that and lobby them to use it that way. So I'm just wondering if we have some idea of the available funds.
No.
Yeah, go ahead. Lucy.
Without getting into the budget discussion, a quick update because it came up. The city council approved the budget but did not allocate any DD funding. I don't even think DD came up during the discussion. So no Measure DD money has been allocated towards any projects. I believe Measure DD money just started getting collected, but the council has taken no action yet. So it will be the CAC. The next steps for the CAC would be to propose a project to use funds on once we have those funds.
That's fine. So I had some thoughts on this. If nobody else has anything, I could kind of launch into it, but I'm interested to see what other people think.
Yeah, if you have any more questions.
One question I had is just envisioning how practically how this would work. Would the tenants share the charging stations, or would it end up where individual tenants are getting a dedicated charger? Because I just could see some. It's nice to create availability for a lot of people, but I could see some challenges if people are relying on the use of a charger exclusively. So I don't know if there's any research into what's worked in multifamily or what we would envision for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. That's definitely one of those questions that we would need to figure out in the process of creating a program like this. There are definitely examples of lots of different ways of doing this. So like the EBC program, for example, is going to require that all of these spaces are shared. But lots of other programs don't have any requirements like that. They kind of let the property owner just do it however they want. Some want them to be allocated to specific users. And that kind of depends too on what the billing system looks like. Sometimes it's easier to bill if it's only one person using a station. And then there's also technology that makes it so that you can just figure out who's using what electricity when. So yeah, I think that's, it's a tricky issue that there are lots of possible answers to. Any other questions?
Michelle, one question I had was you mentioned a couple of other programs like Santa Monica, Long Beach, and Burlington. For those city programs, were they administered by the city, or did they do that through a partnership with local agencies?
As far as I could tell, they were managed by the city itself. They might have been in some sort of partnership, but it wasn't readily apparent. Yes, Member Peterson.
Yeah, so what is, I'm kind of curious as to, I guess my question is, what is staff's take on this as far as available staff time to work on something like this? Is this a big hurdle, or is this fit within what you plan on doing as part of supporting climate action?
That's a great question. I don't feel like I know exactly the answer to that. I guess that's more of a Jeff question. Unfortunately, he's not here with us tonight.
Yeah.
So maybe we can get back to you on that. Based on my conversations with him, I think he imagines it as being something feasible for us to do at staff time. But it kind of does depend on, some of the details down the road, theoretically.
Yeah, I think I'll add that we as staff members are directed by ultimately the city manager, who is directs based on city council action. So if the committee were to propose a project like this to the city council for use of Measure DD funds, that would also imply, if it were approved, I think that staff time would be delegated to working on this project. I think unless there's city, again, we can check back with Jeff, but from what I understand, unless if the city council did not approve a project of this scope, we likely would not spend significant amounts of staff time on this because we would not have direction to do so.
Thanks
Does
for
that make
clarifying
sense?
that, Lizzie.
Sorry, Michelle.
I said thanks for clarifying that, Lizzie.
Yeah.
So, Member Larson.
Do you, I remember when we were doing the climate action plan, we had a group of landlords come in to give their input on from the ownership, property ownership perspective. Has city received any requests from property owners, or do we have like a small group of property owners that we could access easily to discuss ideas with?
We definitely have access, or we definitely have some stakeholders we could reach out to. Without naming names, Michelle and I have independently reached out to one stakeholder just to get a pulse as a part of research for a potential project. I don't want to share too much information because we didn't ask this person if we could share their information. But we would definitely, as a part of this project, want to convene a stakeholder group, and as staff, we could lead that effort.
When you talked to them, was it that they were interested or just questioning, or?
I think without giving too much information, I think it was not a negative response. We got a lot of great feedback.
Okay.
And I think there's an opportunity to learn more.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I just don't want to provide too much information.
Yeah, I'm not. I wasn't trying to dig.
No, don't worry. I just want to make sure you know why I'm kind of dancing a line around.
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Committee Member Larson?
It's kind of a minor point, but when I was reading the memo, the inventory of multifamily dwellings didn't quite add up. Was that meant to be, that wasn't meant to be like a breakdown of every unit in Albany, right? I mean, it's because the total number didn't add up to the subunits below. So, I mean, was it?
Under the building type column?
Yeah, 255 buildings, but then there was 44 10 units and 15 20 units. So,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of missing buildings there. So I didn't know if that was.
Yeah, there are a whole bunch of under 10 units that I didn't include in this. But I guess it would be 211
Okay, so
buildings
that's
that were under 10 units. Yeah.
Okay.
I was just trying to kind of give context for that.
Okay, fair enough.
Above.
Member Peterson?
So I'm assuming multifamily doesn't include single family residences that are rented, right? So all what is a multifamily then? 3 and more units?
Yeah, 3 or more.
Okay. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, 3 or more is how most state organizations define multifamily units. And so that's how we as a city typically define them. Or it's single family and duplex are kind of under the same roof.
I do have a question for members of the Zero Emission Transportation Subcommittee. So I believe that kind of our high level approach here is that we specified, I think, 4 or 5 different programs that we'd be interested in getting staff analysis from. And I believe that kind of the intention is that, we will sort of learn about a couple of these programs, learn about some of the design considerations around them, and then try to select a small number of programs to directly approach. Is that the general understanding of this process?
Well, just to jump in. Yeah, I think that, there was this one and then there were a couple others. I can't remember them off the top of my head. But this was probably the one we're most interested in.
Yeah.
I would say yes, short answer, yes. And so there are 2 others that staff could come back with, but I'm gonna well, it's not a question, but when we get into next steps and comments, I have a lot of thoughts about this. So I'll hold those off till we get past questions.
Chair Chen, we don't have any members of the public still, so we can kind of blend questions into discussion this time. Not usually, but this time.
Okay, that sounds good. So yeah, I guess if we don't have any other questions, perhaps we could move into discussion. Oh, committee member Larson?
Yeah, sorry, I just have one more question that I thought of. That Michelle, you mentioned level 1 as one of the options, which is basically extension cord plugged into your 120 outlet, right? So what's the are there any programs that actually used level 1 charging for this? I mean, that seems a little, I mean, why was it on the list, basically?
Yeah, there are quite a few programs that are really focusing on level 1 charging, because you can get a lot of level 1 chargers without needing to do major electrical upgrades on some of these older buildings. And they work for commutes generally. So there were quite a few where they would maybe do 10 level 1 chargers and then 1 level 2 charger for the kind of, everyone can use it if they need to charge faster. And there are, the kind of extension cord type options. And then there are also kind of slightly higher tech versions of this. There are plugs that can actually track who is using the power and bill it to different people. And, you can also install an outlet that's directly in front of the charging space. So you don't need the whole extension cord get up. So yeah, that's definitely something that's being pursued by quite a few agencies.
Thanks.
Committee member Peterson.
Well, so I don't have any more questions, but one thought I had was that I kind of see this as having 2 levels of potential project here. I mean, there's a lot of good questions that were raised here, and I really appreciate all the work that Michelle did there. But I think what's really compelling is the idea of using this, trying to be efficient, and rather than making a very detailed, laser-focused type of program, is to have something that just does sort of maybe a general incentive that is also combined with, interest in electrification. So again, what I was thinking is if we focus, I like how you narrowed down to a limited number of buildings that would be most easy to address. If we could find one of those and also run some surveys of the tenants to see if there's some people that are interested in having, getting rid of their internal combustion passenger vehicle and replacing it with an EV, and they've been holding off because they had nowhere to charge it, that those would be prioritized to get this incentive. So that was a thought I had. And then that would also, there would be more of a willingness on the side of the property owner to accommodate that. I think there is a California law on the books that says if you are a renter and you want to have a charge point for your electric vehicle, as long as it can be relatively accommodated, you can have it, but you have to pay for it. So again, I don't think there's anything that would stop us from funding that and then making that happen. Like with Eric, I'm a little, I was a little surprised at the cost. And I know when I put EV charge points in at my home, of course, I'm not in, there's all sorts of complications with multi-family buildings, but, putting a 120, 20 amp circuit off a panel, if there's room to accommodate it, I mean, I'd be flabbergasted if it went over $1,000. But, and then, level 2 going over 20,000, I'm just scratching my head. I mean, I up my service to 200 amps for less than 4,000, and put in a 220 volt outlet for about $500-600. So anyway, I'm just but all the details of the cost, I think I would encourage that we find cost-effective ways to do it as part of the project, so we get the most bang for the buck.
Yeah, I can just add a little bit of extra context on the costs. I think it's useful to look at the lower numbers. I can go back up there. The higher numbers are the kinds of buildings where it's a surface parking lot and there's no panel nearby and you have to dig through the concrete to put electrical wires out there. And, there are things that are really difficult to do, and that's why the cost can skyrocket. But, if you avoid those kinds of projects and do the ones where it's right next to the panel and you just have to do a little thing along the wall and whatever, then it can be pretty cheap. And, in certain cases, a level 1 charger could be $1,000 or $500 if you have the perfect situation. So, those lower numbers, especially like the kind of 4,000 or 5,000 range for level 2 chargers, are certainly possible if you're kind of picking your projects correctly.
Another thing I've noticed, and I guess this is a question, is that you can buy these kind of fancier. I have one when my first charge point I put in, but realistically all you need is an outlet, because most of the charging equipment that comes with the car, you can get plug adapters and it'll just plug into an 220, like a electric dryer outlet. Is there anything, since the city, we would be using city to fund this, that it would be required to use a kind of more established, like, is there certified equipment we would have to be using rather than just putting in a more simplistic approach, like just having outlets?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I think as long as it's up to the basic electrical code and it's safe, I don't think there would be any real requirements on that.
Yeah, we'd have to check. But if anything, as a city, we might have to even go through like a process of deciding who, if it were to come from a company, if the expense was significant enough, like a competitive process to decide what organization we go to, because we can't always just pick. So yeah, that's the one thing that comes to mind. It's the opposite of what you would think, that we can't be choosy.
Well, I think it would be difficult for us all here right now to field and find answers to all these questions, and I have a lot more. It sounds like this is maybe something. Would it make sense for we could make a new subcommittee to sort of pull everything together and come up with some ideas around this, or is that something, does staff want the committee as a whole to respond specifically to those questions?
Sorry, Michelle. I think that would be up to the members of the committee as a whole, in particular the ones who are not a part of the transportation subcommittee, whether or not you want to have a role in answering these questions or leaving it to the subcommittee. So I think that would be Chair Chen and Vice Chair Merchant and Committee Member Breeding. Since you're not on the subcommittee, the question is, do you want to discuss these questions today, or do you want to defer it to the subcommittee to answer these questions for the group and bring it back next meeting?
And also, you could give some general thoughts and then also take it to the subcommittee to go into more detail. I think that'd be an option too. Or thoughts that don't relate to these questions. That's also fine.
I mean, I would love to have the subcommittee take a first stab at thinking through these questions. It's kind of sometimes easier to do in a smaller group and then bring them back to us. I think one other question I had, and I know it was on the presentation, but data gathering, like what would our data gathering look like so that this would feel meaningful as a pilot project, so that we could take the information and apply it toward other future projects. I kind of would want kind of a clear idea of how we would go about that. I think would be helpful, just to, since a limited number of people will benefit from this, but hopefully the information we gather from it will have broader ramifications for future work.
Yeah, I guess I have pretty similar thoughts to Member Merchant. I'd be happy to have the subcommittee sort of take a stab at this. I guess one clarification I'd love to make, Michelle, these program design questions, is the goal to get answers to these so that we can have a better estimate for a proposal to the city? Or is it more just like, if we decided to use, to pursue this program as one of the 3 or 4 projects that we'd like to fund through Measure DD, that we would just need a lot of clarity after deciding to approach this program to actually design a program around it?
That's a great question. I think, if you were to really pursue this and bring it to council, then I think you at least would want to have some answers to these questions. And it might be useful to think through them beforehand, to kind of, it might be that in thinking through these questions, you might realize we want to do it this way, or we don't want to do it at all, or, something like this will work, but it needs to kind of change in scope or something like that, which is why I brought them up now. But I don't know that necessarily all of these need to be answered at any given point in time. They're kind of more of a guide, I'd say.
Yeah, I think particularly some of the big questions, like how would the costs of the project be split? Yeah, that in particular, and the landlord profit question, because council would be approving use of budgeted funds, we would probably have to have a very clear picture of what funds we'd be looking at. And so for those questions in particular to go unanswered, we'd probably not get project approval. That's just based on my thought. I can't guarantee that that's correct, but I would think that council wouldn't want to approve funding for something they don't know the whole funding pie for.
Okie doke. Well, I guess one of my initial thoughts is I'm not a member of the Zero Emission Transportation Subcommittee, but I think this program sounds really exciting. And although I would love to hear analysis of other programs, I would be pretty comfortable if we decided to use this as sort of our Measure DD program towards the climate action plan. And maybe explore this further within the subcommittee. Committee member Larson?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I appreciate we could do it in the subcommittee, but I just wanted to say as a member of the subcommittee that I'm really excited about this. And Michelle, thank you very much for, coalescing this into a, beginning of a plan or proposal, and great beginnings of questions. And yes, we would definitely want to delve in and, create a fairly firm plan to, come back to the committee with, and then get to the city council. But it's super exciting. And I would encourage us to look at this as, like you said, a pilot program, not a program they're going to roll out to the whole city where it's fully baked and, buttoned down. But this is an awesome opportunity to learn how we can implement things like this. So if we have that freedom to operate, I think that's a fantastic start.
Committee member Peterson?
Yeah, I think also taking sort of a higher level view, we had these 3 areas that we were focusing on with the overall cap, which, there's zero emission transportation, and then there was building electrification, and then there was green infrastructure. So I think maybe if we can come up with a efficient process to move this along. What I'm concerned about is that we don't get too bogged down in getting something completely perfect, before we take it to city council. I like what Eric said. This is a pilot. But we should think about some higher level, kind of metrics that we want to establish as far as goals. And what I really liked about Michelle's presentation, and made my ears perk up, was when she said, hey, we in these buildings, we have the opportunity to impact hundreds of tenants. And that's huge. When I think of the DD funds, I think, if we can go back and say, hey, we helped 20 or 30 residents, make EVs part of their life that they wouldn't otherwise. That's that's huge. And I think thinking in terms of the kind of goals we want to achieve, as a pilot project, then it can always roll on and do more. So with that, I get a little worried. Partnering with others means then you've got to get approvals and inputs from others. So I think just being on that committee, I'm trying to think of ways to make it pretty simple. The city gets almost like a volunteer group to do it, and then they just say, here's the funds you can use, and move it towards success. But I'm like with Eric, this is exciting to think we could do something like this. Should we, to move along, should we make them, we're at a point where we should make a motion to, and I suggest we establish a new subcommittee that would be, what is this called? The multifamily
Multifamily EV charging
pilot subcommittee, rather than continuing the existing subcommittee along, which is questionable.
Yeah, so I think you're right. I think if it were a motion, someone has to make this motion, not me, but my suggestion would be a motion to sunset the Zero Emissions Transportation Action Plan Subcommittee and establish the, whatever this subcommittee would be called, and designate members. So just kind of start from scratch.
So I guess from a process perspective, I believe that we had 3 or 4 proposals that came out of the ZET committee for this particular pillar. Are we sort of deciding not to pursue those and just tackling this one as kind of a first pass?
I have opinion on that. I can see that each one of these takes a fair amount of staff time to sort of pursue, and in the interest of just moving things along, as staff brings them forward, we can create a subcommittee to coalesce thoughts and information and then bring it back to the whole committee to get final input. I think that would be a way to just keep movement, keep things rolling, rather than trying to get all. If we wait on, we can be doing things simultaneously now, as Michelle goes on to look at the potentially other 2 projects we suggested. Plus, we'll have others for electrification and for green infrastructure. So I'm more than happy to finish the motion.
Not yet. We do have a member of the public that popped in for this agenda item. So Chair Chen, I don't know if you wanted to reopen public comment just in case this member has a comment on this item, which is item 6-3, Zero Emissions Transportation Project Analysis.
Yeah, let's open up for public comment.
To the member of the public, if you have a comment on item 6-3, please raise your hand. Not seeing a hand raised. So back to you, Chair Chen.
Okay, so I guess, do we have a motion to establish a new subcommittee?
And my staff recommendation would be to sunset the other one as well in the same motion. If that's what the committee wants.
Committee Member Larson?
So yes, I will go ahead and make that motion of what Lizzie said.
Do you mind?
That we sunset the zero emission transportation subcommittee
Mhm.
as having fulfilled its charter and proposing it. And then we establish a new subcommittee to investigate the multifamily charging station pilot program.
I'll second.
Should the motion say establish a multifamily charging pilot program subcommittee?
Okay.
Committee member Breeding?
Aye.
Committee member Larson?
Aye.
Vice Chair Merchant?
Aye.
Committee member Peterson?
Aye.
Chair Chen?
Aye.
Oh my, and we forgot to establish who is in that subcommittee. My mistake. I don't think we need to include that in the motion, but we should establish as a group who is in that subcommittee.
That's actually good. I mean, I'm more than happy. I was on the other. I'm more than happy to continue with that. But if someone else wants to participate, that kind of brings up another question. If people do gather ideas, can we send them to you, Lizzie, even if we're not on the subcommittee, and get them to the subcommittee?
Not in between meetings, because that would probably be too many CAC members communicating with each other about non-factual information via
Well,
email.
then I definitely volunteer as long as everybody's okay with it.
Okay,
I volunteer.
Yeah, and I'd love to participate if there's room for that.
We can have 3, right? But one less than a quorum. Yeah.
so committee member Breeding and committee member Merchant, would either of you want to be in the subcommittee and then we can have a conversation, or are you okay letting it be those 3?
I'm happy with it being those 3. I still have my other subcommittee and my new vice chair duties. That sounds, yeah, I'm happy to let those 3 members do the subcommittee. Sounds great.
Great.
Also happy to let the 3 members do the subcommittee.
Okay, great. That was easy. Okay, so we now have the multifamily charging pilot program subcommittee of committee member Peterson, committee member Larson, and Chair Chen. All right, back to you, Chair Chen. Oh, committee member
Yeah, Committee Member Larson?
Do we also have Michelle as a guest member?
I'm happy to be a guest.
Okay.
Can't always attend, maybe, but I'm happy to receive your invitations and attend when possible.
Valuable to have you involved.
Okie doke. So that was item 6-3. So I believe the next item on the agenda is item 6-4, which is a follow-up on the city council budget discussion. And Lizzie, I believe last time Jeff presented this, I don't see him here, so I'm kind of curious if there's an update here.
Jeff is off the grid, and I am stepping in for a quick update in the capacity I am able. As I mentioned in the last agenda item, the city council approved the biennial budget, but did not have a detailed discussion of allocating Measure DD funding. So there's not much of an update for this committee other than that the council approved the biennial budget. this agenda item was recommended by Chair Chen as an opportunity to provide an update on the council's decision on the budget. And if the committee wanted to open back up the discussion of non-zero emissions transportation items that, please apologize for my dog's collar noise. Open up the discussion in case the committee wanted to consider non-transportation related projects for consideration to propose for use of Measure DD funds when the council does have a more concrete discussion about DD specifically.
Committee Member Peterson?
Yeah, so if the committee wanted to encourage city council in some way to be more transparent about the DD funds and hold to the recommendations of the voters for the third. I guess what I'm worried about is we'll get a whole budget cycle that has no mention of this and we won't get any money. So I'm wondering if there's a way for, or should we just, I'm more than happy to attend a city council meeting and as a citizen, just bring that forward. I also know of other people who are doing this and I know of people on the council who are doing this. So just because the city manager didn't identify these funds doesn't mean that we're not going to pursue them. So I'm just curious, as an advisory body, is that sort of outside? I mean, if we came, it would be nice if we could come together as an advisory body and say, hey, don't forget, we were gonna use these DD funds accordingly. We would sure like to know how much there is and what's happening with them. Or is that something outside our purview?
No, I think that's in the purview of the committee to get that message across. As far as the logistics of doing so, I would have to check with Jeff. But I think I should mention that you're always welcome as a representative of the Albany community, not as a representative of the Climate Action Committee, unless you were expressly designated by the committee. You can always make public comment during a council meeting as it relates to something you want to speak about. So I will say that first. From what I understand, and again, I'll double check with Jeff, the committee, what it sounds like to me, the next step would be is the committee going to the council with a proposal and saying, we have these Measure DD, we have this project, we would like to allocate Measure DD funding to it. And then the council would have a discussion of saying, okay, we have this much available and we are going to allocate this percentage of funds or this number of funds to it. So for example, the multifamily charging electric vehicle pilot, the words not in that order, multifamily electric vehicle charging pilot, if the committee were to flesh out the details of that project and then bring that to council and say, we would like council to allocate this many thousands of dollars towards this project, that's how I understand that would work. As far as just making general public comment about Measure DD in general, I think, again, any committee member is welcome to make a public comment at a council meeting. The next one being next Monday.
So my concern is if we wait too long, we'll go there and we can ask, but they'll say the budget's already been determined. They will have voted on it. The city manager has presented it. There's nothing in it that says DD funds. So I don't want to miss the boat. So I want as early as possible to make a forceful statement to the city council that there's political will here to use these funds the way the voters, they can't. The measure did not mandate, we didn't get that, but there was an agreement to do it this way. And frankly, the only way that even got to the city council was community members had to push for that because there was essentially sort of an end run to just make it a general measure, even though there've been 10 years in the works of trying to get a utility tax measure to support climate action items. So I'm a little leery about just saying, oh, well, they didn't say anything about DD and the city manager. City manager just rips along doing what she's hired to do, which is put a budget together and make it final and get the city running. So there's no incentive there to do the will of the voters, but on the city council there is, because we have 3 members on the council that actually endorsed Measure DD, and we can hold their feet to the fire. So to me, as a private citizen, I don't think as much clout as their whole advisory board coming back and saying, we want, you know, DD funds need to be identified, and we're going to come to you with recommendations on how to spend them. So please track those and keep them there, unless there is some pressing urgent need that you can explain to us, will overrule what the voters had requested.
Committee Member Larson?
Nick, are you thinking about asking for more transparency about the collection of the DD funds and how the funds are being sort of collected and what the pot looks like? Or are you looking for, is a certain portion being allocated to climate action plans, even though we don't have any firm proposals?
Yeah, I think we need to make clear that that certain funds need to be available for supporting the climate action plan. And that was the whole point of Measure DD. Information I've gotten is that that is not happening. And the budget process is moving ahead, may be finalized. I don't know when it's finalized, but I don't think we can come in after it's finalized and say, well, they're not there, but we want you to find these now. I don't think that's going to work. I have no confidence in that. So I don't know if we'll have our proposals together in time, if we're going out in subcommittee, coming back in the next meeting, you know, maybe in 2 months, we can provide something to the city council that says we want DD funds for this. But I'm worried that that'll be too late if they've approved budget already.
So my understanding from watching the city council meeting is there's sort of a accounting version of the budget, and then there's kind of a political accountability or presentation version of the budget. So I believe that the specific issue with Measure DD is that there were some members of the city council that I think had interest in creating a special reserve fund for Measure DD funding. That did not even get put to a motion. So from the accounting perspective, we have a general fund with an intention for the funding to be used in a certain way. That being said, I think that many members of the city council were very, very open about wanting to get a better understanding from the presentation perspective of how general funds that have been intended to be used in a particular way are being tracked and presented to the city council and to the citizens of Albany. So I think that from a process perspective, that's something that the city manager and the finance committee sort of have to hammer out. And I guess my recommendation would be that, you know, it's June now. We have one more climate action meeting next month before we are off in August. So I would say that if we can put together a proposal that has sort of a program proposal for each of the 3 pillars that we've designated in our work plan to put Measure DD funding towards, and come out with something, you know, in the next meeting to discuss and present to the council after that, I believe that that would be a pretty effective way to, you know, make this issue a little more concrete, I think, for the city budgeting process. But I wouldn't be specifically concerned about how the accounting works out. Like, I think that's a little bit orthogonal to the sort of intention of how general operating budget will be spent in the city.
Yeah, I would love it if by the next meeting we could have something together for not only the multifamily EV charging pilot project, but also for maybe a urban forestry tree planting project and a building electrification or a heat pump water heater incentive program or something, whatever comes under the electrification. I'm just, I'm looking at staff, and even if we came out of subcommittee with recommendations, staff is going to have to go do some work and pull it together into a format that then can go to the city council, bring it back, have us say that. So I just don't see us at the next meeting telling staff to take this to the city council unless I'm totally wrong with the city process. And I mean, I would think it'd be relatively easy for us to send a message to the city council as a full committee that we are coming with recommendations to use funds that were designated through DD or were brought in through DD with a understanding they'd be used this way, and that we would encourage the city to direct the city manager to make, accounting available so we know what kind of funds will be put forward for that. I mean, just something to raise a flag and say, don't forget about this. I'm just not very trusting of how the budget process works otherwise.
Real quick before we continue to dive into discussion, I do notice that we have a member of the public with their hand raised if we're moving from questions to discussion. So Chair Chen.
Yeah, so I guess let's open the discussion to, or I guess question to public comment.
Lucinda?
Hi, Lucinda Young here, and I just wanted to make a brief comment in support of Member Peterson's concern about there being transparency as a member of the public who supported Measure DD, and I've heard from many other members of the public who supported DD. We want to know what these funds are being used for. If I don't think any kind of formal accounting is needed, but there needs to be some explanation, and I share Member Peterson's concern about the difficulty of that happening, and the committee doing what we can to move that in the direction that we want it to go, with some accountability to the public. That's all. Thank you. Thanks. Thanks for all of your work.
No other members of the public in the audience or with their hand raised.
Committee member Merchant?
Yeah, I think I would be in support of taking something to city council at this point. So I think there's a problem if we remain silent around the work that we're doing, because we are doing work and maybe we aren't ready to have a robust proposal to put forth to them. But given where they're at in the budgeting process, given what our member of the public said and what committee member Peterson said, I think that silence around this doesn't necessarily serve us at this point. And I don't kind of want to take a wait and see approach and just assume that the funds will be available for us once we're ready to present our proposals. So I don't know what that looks like and what we're able to do, but if committee member Peterson is willing to go to the next city council meeting to give them an update on what we're working on and our expectations that these funds are going to be available when we have proposals to bring forward, I think that is meaningful and important.
Committee member Peterson?
Yeah, actually, I think, yeah, I didn't want to be hostile towards the council. I think that committee member Merchant has a great idea there. If we can at least get on the agenda to say what we're working on or put forward, what we'll be bringing to the city council. Then once we go, I think our next agenda item is to, actually it's this agenda item, and I have some suggestions. If we could come up with two others And what we can say is, this is what we're pursuing. We've looked at this one. We've got it to a stage where it's in subcommittee. We're going to pull it into something more detailed and get it going. We can, I think that would be informative to the city council in their budgeting process to know that these are real things and just not if they have a chance, sort of thing. I mean, I think that's why it's really important we make it as simple as possible and have just simple, small steps that we're testing out to see how it works and to gather data. So we can certainly at our next meeting put together a little more detail on that. Maybe I can, well, we can't work on a Google Doc together, right?
No.
Yeah, this is really frustrating because it's only once a month. And as Chair Chen pointed out, August is dark. So there's a whole month gone there. So we could end up in September or even October before we're even going to the city council with anything hugely meaningful. Anyway, is that something we can ask to get on the agenda about?
Yeah, Lizzie, so one thing I am curious about is we had a discussion about Measure DD funding about 4 or 5 Climate Action Committee meetings ago.
In April.
I believe we came up with a list of priorities. And my understanding was that list of priorities was going to be communicated to the city council in the study session. And I guess when I attended the study session, I didn't hear any mention of it. So I'm just curious, like I believe we had a proposal that was pretty high level that we intended to get into the city council process, and for whatever reason that didn't seem to happen. So I'm wondering if you can provide a little context there on what maybe we could be doing better to get on the agenda.
I will have to, as far as the last part of your question, how to get on the check with Jeff. But yes, this, if you all see my screen, was the formal recommendation that the Climate Action Committee made, which was supposed to go to council, from what I understood, when they were considering how to allocate DD, but because DD hasn't been allocated, from what I understand, this hasn't come up. But this was what the committee proposed. I would think that if the committee were to, this is still the committee's recommendation, again, I have to check with Jeff, but what I would think would happen is if this is still the recommendation, it would be a recommendation that council have a discussion or consider allocating or designating funding from the general fund collected from Measure D to future use for these projects. That's what I would think would happen. So then if council were to have an agenda item dedicated to allocating funding to, or allocating Measure DD funding, this recommendation would go to the council.
So yeah, I guess a question for the committee. I think that maybe if we want to get something done before the August recess, we sort of have 2 options. One is to move forward with our previous prioritization statement here and maybe just try that again. Or an alternative is we could work off of this and try to get a more detailed statement. Maybe come up with some numbers around it, discuss that at the next climate action meeting, and sort of present a more detailed proposal to the council at that point in time. What do people think would be a better option? Committee Member Peterson?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. And what I really like is if we just have one very succinct, like after the first bullet, we could have the multifamily. I would still say it in that general sense and then say, here's our first pilot, the multifamily EV charge station pilot project. And then for the one down below, and I think under this agenda item, I have a list of things I'm sure other people have ideas too, but we can have like a tree planting or a tree a tree plan or recording project. And, the other one, even just putting forward a heat pump water heater incentive program specific to Albany. Those would be 3 very specific things. And you could say, we want to do $1,000 incentives on this one, and we think we'll have 20. There's $20,000. So, again, that gives us a framework to sort of hang a bit of reality on, and even come up with a timeline on it. And we'll provide staff with also information that then they can say, well, there are these aspects that we need to do in order to get the plan in place, and these other entities we need to partner with or at least communicate with. So I think this gives us a good framework to then present, climate action and adaptation plan actions that are funded by DD that we want the city council to be aware of, that are coming soon to a theater near you.
Committee member Rollerson?
Yeah, I like the train of thinking. I was thinking the same thing of taking credit for the work that we've already done with the multifamily charging pilot project. Maybe even say in subcommittee or something like that. But I was thinking about what you said about trying to develop any kind of estimates of budgets of money, and it feels like we're doing a service to the council by saying we're your advisory body, and we're trying to answer that public question of what are you spending the money on, and here's our plans we're working on, and we want you city council to be aware of these so that you can start allocating money from the DD so that we can be ready for these we're coming together when the funding comes and when the ideas come together. I would hesitate to try to put in any budgets into this proposal to council right now, because it's going to be really, rough estimates. And I think we'd be better off, like Member Merchant said, getting the communication going rather than trying to be more detailed. So I'm supportive of this.
Yeah, that certainly resonates with me. I would say that for a similar city budget discussion that happened on the sugar sweetened beverage tax, the discussion there was super high level. It was, we want to have an education program about avoiding sugary beverages, and we think that that'll be about $10,000 for education, which includes like flyers and other things of that nature. So I agree that we probably don't need to have that enormous level of detail, but I believe that input was a pretty useful starting point for that discussion, at least. So I guess what I would recommend that we do as a committee is, it seems like for the first pillar of our DD priorities, we have a pretty good sense of the multifamily EV charging pilot as a starting point. Perhaps for the next climate action agenda, we can have an agenda item for the urban greening plan, just to talk through that, figure out something to do there. And also have another agenda item for the building electrification item that we'd like to select. And then once we kind of discuss those, we can maybe put a more concrete proposal forward to the city council and aim to do that in the July timeframe. Does that sound reasonable to everybody?
Yeah, I actually, if we have time, I don't know how we're doing on time. Can't see my
We have
clock.
about 30 minutes until the technical stop time.
Yeah,
With one other discussion one other discussion and then subcommittee updates on the agenda.
yeah. So more than, I have a couple suggestions for these other ones that I would love to put forward now, and if people feel strongly enough about them, you know, we could have staff look at them in a little more detail. And
One thing to note is as far as fleshing out project details like what Michelle did for the EV charger pilot program, that took a significant amount of time for 1 month. So we cannot promise that we could do that for 4 projects or 4+ projects between this meeting and next month's meeting. Just so the committee is aware.
yeah, what, again, along the ideas of keeping it simple, I'm just thinking we'll have one for each of the pillars, as Chair Chen called them. And I think, you know, we've kind of been thinking about this, or those of us who've been on committee for a while have been thinking about this for quite a while, and know of some other cities that have had success with similar type plans. So maybe we could, if people are okay, I just had some suggestions for putting those forward. So can I put a couple forward if people wanted to think about them?
Yeah, let's do one round, I guess, for each of the pillars for everybody in the committee. And just, you know, if you don't have any immediate thoughts that come up, feel free to research things on your own. We can come back to that for the next meeting to discuss. But yeah, maybe just to sort of get a better idea of what to talk about for the next meeting, we could get some ideas here written down. So I guess Member Peterson, since it seems like you've given this a lot of thought already, perhaps you could kick us off.
Yeah, so I think that for the urban greening plan bullet, you know, again, it's working with the city forester to fund, you know, to identify where trees are needed, fund providing trees, and developing a volunteer group that would be focused on planting trees within public right of way per the urban forester's recommendations. So it's just supercharging what is kind of happening now anyway, as far as tree maintenance, and maybe putting a little more thought in documenting it.
Committee Member Merchant?
I like that a lot. And the only thing I would add is adding in a tree care component, just so that they actually thrive once we get them planted.
Just note that to me, who has done some research on urban forestry master plans, this sounds like an urban forestry master plan.
No, I didn't. Sorry to cut in, but again, with the keep it simple and a little pilot project, doing a master plan involves consultants and a lot more money and the whole thing. This would just be working with the knowledge of the current urban forester who's there, probably struggling diligently to maintain the trees in the city, and just giving them a little bit more resources and support so that we can get more trees planted. And then, you know, later, if we can come up with a master plan, that'd be great. But, you know, he's got expertise on what kind of trees we want to put. But anyway, that was sort of the idea.
Does anybody have any other thoughts on the urban greening pillar?
So should I pull this idea up top then?
Yeah, I suppose so. I think, Lizzie, since you brought it up, I would like to also maybe do a little investigation into what an urban forestry master plan would look like. I'm a little less familiar with that than I think other members of the committee might be. So I'd be happy to discuss that at the next meeting if that's Yeah.
Give you a quick summary if you don't want to wait a whole month. Basically, yeah, it would be probably hiring a consultant to do an assessment of where trees should go in the community to provide maximum benefits for shading urban heat island effect communities that maybe don't have as many trees, like doing some GIS layering to really understand where we need trees. Determining what the size of the tree wells are so that we're not ripping up sidewalks, because if you attend city council meetings regularly, you'll know that that's a big issue that comes up often and is important to City of Albany community members. So determining what trees go best in what areas so that they don't rip up sidewalks or streets. And then for as far as developing a volunteer program, that would probably include designating funding for potentially a staff person who would man a volunteer program, and then tree care. That would, I think, have to be assessed as well if we're putting in a bunch of new trees. How would we make sure that we have if they're city trees, staffing available to do that tree maintenance? So a plan would look at all those things and recommend policies and programs to the city council to adopt to fund. That makes sense. It's kind of like how we created a climate action and adaptation plan to outline what we needed to do in order to meet our greenhouse gas reduction targets. And then by taking it to the city council is saying, okay, these are our priorities. And this is what we in the future will aim to do. So I think I will just share with the committee from my understanding, the committee is welcome to recommend, I think, whatever the committee would like, but there would probably be, we would have to consult with the department that would be in charge of running such program, which would be Public Works. And they would have a staff recommendation about what this would look like as well, I would imagine. Assessing the current capacity of the department and the staff available to do this as is.
Sounds good. Well, should we move on to the final pillar, which is the building electrification pillar? Committee member Larson?
I'll go ahead and voice the one that's been around for a long time on the committee is the panel upgrade. So electric panel upgrade in probably rebates or financial help with electric panel upgrades for homeowners and multifamily dwellings that want to participate. I think that's the beginning hurdle that a lot of people face when they start talking about electrification. There's the gotcha of, oh, your panel's not big enough. You need to spend $5,000 to upgrade your panel. So.
Committee member Peterson?
Yeah, so another one is, and it could trigger into needing a panel upgrade, but where people, what I think is important is to capture those people that, and Eric was one of these, whose gas appliance dies and they need right away. And the easiest thing is just to jump in and get another gas appliance, which then will be around for another 20 years. So I think having, I would make it generic as like kind of a gas appliance to alternative to gas appliance grant project or something. But the most common one is actually hot water heating, and that does use a lot of gas in our homes. It's a little more tricky to change the furnace and much more complicated. So hot water heaters tend to go out a lot and get replaced. So adding additional incentives, probably partnering with another group, but heat pump hot water heater incentive program. And I think, we would, the trick there is to really let people know widely that that's available and that it's easy to follow and that they'll do it.
Bayren does have a heat pump hot water heater incentive program. So are you suggesting that we would maybe like double the incentive, or?
Well, again, I've had a bunch of thoughts about this. When I did it, I didn't use their program. What you have to use certain contractors, blah, blah, blah. And I wanted to use an Albany contractor. So, but yeah, maybe partnering would be a good way to start, because then we don't have to have our staff administer it. We can just tell it's just a matter of providing the funds to Bayren and they would make it available. So whatever's the most efficient way, and wouldn't require a lot. I think people have mentioned to me that since Bayren's in the business of kind of doing that already and has a working program that's well advertised, we could piggyback on that. So I think it's a good idea.
Committee Member Larson?
Yeah, I'll just, Bayren's a really good organization, but I would like to see our city incentive program maybe geared towards Albany residents, because, and the reason is that Bayren is doing a good thing. They're trying to build up the contractor base and get them informed, and there's a lot of incentives for contractors. There's very little incentive for the end user, the homeowner, and trying to direct change. I think we would want to pull both levers. And Bayren's already doing the contractor side, so I think that I'd like to see us focusing on the Albany resident side. But probably partnering with Bayren would probably be a good thing to do, just for communication, at least. So, but I don't mean to get too much into details, but I just wanted to. That was my personal experience. Was Bayren was, they support contractors, but the contractor I used hadn't done the extra training that Bayren requires for it to trickle to the homeowner. So he had only done the first level that was okay, contractor approved level, but there was, like he said, there was something crazy, like 100 hours of training he would have had to do to get the homeowner part of the Bayren, and so it just sounded like it was very contractor oriented, and that's a good thing. But anyway, that's my personal experience.
Committee Member Peterson?
Yeah, I just want to say, I mean, all of these have their own little quirks and difficulties in there, and they need to be ironed out. So I think the idea is, and I think just to hit Lizzie's point, maybe with the urban forestry stuff, the first step is doing more of, I don't know, I hate calling things a master plan because it gets all, but just more of an accounting, urban forest accounting, and identify where trees are needed. So, I mean, the city has spent they had a tree task force at one time that met for a couple years and came up with the whole, I mean, we've done a lot of work around trees in this city, and we can use that. It's just, every few years our arborist leaves and then it all sort of ends. But I would be for it, whatever it is, just if it's doing an assessment and a recommendation would be a good start, even if it wasn't a full master plan.
Sounds good. I think this is a pretty good list. So maybe at the next meeting, we can cover each of these in an agenda item and have maybe another agenda item just to kind of piece everything together. But I guess we can sort of do a little planning around that.
So just to get some clarity for what the next meeting would be. Like I mentioned, Michelle and I will probably not have the capacity to go into the detail that Michelle did for the multifamily EV charging pilot program for all of these. So what does the committee want to discuss next month? We could probably take on one of these realistically, because Michelle has further work to do on the multifamily EV charging pilot. And then I could probably take on a bit, but neither of us, I think, would be able to take on a whole new one. It's going to be a busy summer.
Committee Member Peterson?
Yeah, I mean, you seem to have a good handle on the tree master plan, or at least getting a consultant to assess our tree situation, and with the specific goal of finding the best places to increase our tree canopy.
Mm-hmm.
So with the idea of it promoting shading and more cool summers when things are real hot, as a climate change mitigation measure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could come to the committee with some analysis similar to what Michelle did for the multifamily EV charging pilot, of what a good, I know you don't like the word plan, but plan would be for the city, what kind of components we would want to maybe pay a consultant to look into for us, and an assessment of what that might cost to include in this proposal.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. It's not that I don't, it's just the master plan aspect is real high level, and maybe we want a more focused on what would specifically address resilience and shading and adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
So a little bit more focus on it, rather than just sort of a general urban forestry master plan.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, yeah, that's a would be a great start, and probably would spend some money to get that done. I mean, it's a major deal.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then that leaves this. I'm not sure if a member of this committee wanted to volunteer to maybe do some analysis into what an electric panel upgrade rebate program might look like. I think it's pretty straightforward if we wanted to partner with Bayren to offer additional, unless we didn't want to partner. That's up to the committee too. But if a committee member wanted to take on this pillar and provide an analysis, that could work.
I'm going to suggest that, because Eric and I both suggested these, and we're going to meet already, that we would just flesh that one out a little bit more. I think it's just a matter of looking at some existing programs and saying, well, we would just supplement those, working in tandem with whatever. Is that okay, Eric?
Yeah, if it's fleshing out the idea a little bit more, that's fine. I'm not going to have time to do any kind of analysis like Michelle did. But then again, I think Michelle's analysis is great, but I'm not sure that for our purpose of informing City Council, it's really necessary to get down into so much detail. So if the committee's okay with that, then yes, I'd sign up for that.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, as far as, I mean, this is to give the council an idea of the real things we're pursuing. And some of them we haven't pursued as far as the others. That doesn't mean they aren't real. So again, I mean, I want to be real mindful of not loading staff up with a lot of stuff to do. And I think we can get the concept across pretty clearly, and even give price ranges, because the idea is we'll go as far as we can with whatever we get. But I think it's important to get these actual ideas before the council know they're real and they're coming.
I agree. And yeah, to that extent, yeah, I'll work with you on that.
Okay. I don't think this requires a motion, since we're just internally as a committee. and staff determining next steps. So as a point of procedure though, Chair Chen, we are at 8:51 and this committee's meeting technically ends at 9. So with that information, I pass the mic back to you.
Yeah, I guess we have, I believe, 2 more agenda items. Oh, sorry, Committee Member Larson, did you have any last thoughts on?
I did. Just before we leave that, Lizzie, are you going to send that, what you just said, is that going to be in the minutes, or are you going to send that out as a document to us, or how are we going to remember what we're doing here?
I will send this to you in an email.
Okay.
Yeah, it will not be a part of the minutes because it's not an action.
Okay.
An action item. Yeah, I'll send that in an email. Okay.
Awesome. All right, so we have 2 more items. We have 6-5, which is sort of last minute discussion on energy metering, and then subcommittee updates. But it is 8:52, so I'm wondering if we have a motion to extend the meeting or whether we'd rather table these issues for another time. Committee Member Peterson?
Yeah, I think, the net metering one is something that's going on for a while. I actually sent a message out to Dan Lieberman with East Bay Community Energy, and they were meeting tonight discussing that very issue because I wanted to know where EBCE stood on that. EBCE was actually opposed to AB 1139, so I think maybe there's some more information that could be brought together around that issue. I don't know if people got to look at it, but it gets pretty complicated and dicey. So what I would suggest is we postpone it to next time, and I could share some information. Lizzie, I don't know how deeply you've looked into this, but I've got a couple links from the CPUC site, that show arguments that other groups have put forward. And it might be good to have those under your belt before we talk about it more.
Michelle knows more about NEM than I do. But I would say, again, Michelle and I are tight on capacity, and we probably won't be able to prepare a full analysis of NEM for this committee for discussion unless the committee were to take concrete action, like recommending something to the council. And I'm not sure, unless we have an idea of what that might be, if it's worth us taking time out of some of the other things we're working on to just provide an informational item. So again, if a committee member wanted to take that on and provide an informational presentation, I think that would be great. But as staff, I think unless there's an actionable item to take to council, it might make sense for us to focus our efforts elsewhere.
Yeah.
Michelle, let me know how you feel, but that's my thought.
Yeah, sorry, maybe just to add a little clarity to this. I think I added this to the agenda and I had a presentation as an informational item here. So I'm happy to push that off till the next meeting. And we can discuss it then. It's not time sensitive in any way.
I'd go along with that.
But as far as putting it on the next agenda, what does the committee want to see? And do we have any volunteers for, if it's an informational presentation, do we have any volunteers for who might want to provide that presentation?
Yeah, I'm happy to volunteer for that. Committee Member Peterson?
So maybe what I'll do is it okay if I send, or I'll send to you, Lizzie, the information I pulled together? So could you share it with Chair Chen?
You can send it directly to him if you're only emailing him.
Yeah.
Just don't email the entire CAC that information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, will do. Thanks.
Cool. Great.
Okey
I think we still need a motion or a decision on what we want to do before 9 o'clock.
Okay, so it looks like we're tabling 6-5 for a future meeting. So the only other item we have is subcommittee updates. Do we want to try to do that in 4 minutes, or do we have a motion to extend the meeting?
Sorry again to chime in, but we do have 2 members of the public, so I want to bank on 6 minutes, which we don't have, in case both members wanted to take 3 minutes of public comment. So I don't think we should plan to squeeze in the last item.
I'll make a motion to extend the meeting to 1:15.
Second.
Okay. We have Committee Member Larson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Merchant,
Yes.
Committee Member Peterson,
Yes.
Chair Chen.
Yes.
Motion carries. Meeting extended to 9:15.
Okie doke. Well, let's move on to item 6-6, subcommittee updates. Committee Member Peterson?
I just had on the last one, was there someone wanting to make public comment on the last one or no?
Didn't really discuss it, but yes, if anyone wanted to make public comment, we technically skipped the agenda item. I guess we didn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, if anyone wants to make public comment on agenda item 6-5, or sorry, yeah, 6-5 net energy metering, please raise your hand. Seeing no hands raised, we're now back to subcommittee updates. Yeah, thank you for calling that.
I can provide an update for the subcommittee that I'm on, the Community Engagement and Outreach Subcommittee that Eric and Graham and I are on. We are still targeting September for when we'll have our community forum about increasing engagement in the Carbon-Free Albany website. And we now have an intern who is working directly with Patrick Journey, who is going to help us, which is going to be terrific. She's has done a lot of research in past work around a range of things, including she's from Mongolia, but currently residing in Ireland, but is connected with KALB. And she is and she's done a lot of research around like pit latrines in Mongolia, a whole range of different things, but she really is interested in learning more about community engagement. So she's very excited to be partnering with us on this. And so we'll, at our next subcommittee meeting, we'll figure out ways to really leverage her support.
I can provide a quick update on the electric rate plan subcommittee. So as discussed earlier in the meeting, we've went forward to the city council with a proposal and it went through. So I think that the work of the subcommittee is pretty much done. And Lizzie, I'm not sure what the process is for winding down a subcommittee, but I think this would be a good time to do so.
I think, Daniel, you seem like the appropriate person, but someone should make a motion to sunset your subcommittee.
Okay, I'll make a motion to sunset the electric rate plan subcommittee then.
Second.
Committee Member Larson?
Yes.
Committee Member, or sorry, Vice Chair Merchant?
Yes.
Committee Member Peterson?
Yes.
Chair Chen?
Yes.
Electric Rate Plan Subcommittee sunsetted. Great. And I think, oh, go ahead, Nick. I was going to say, I got our ZTAP subcommittee update and we sunsetted the subcommittee.
That's all the update I have, is that we totally subset. So yeah, I guess the update, everyone's pretty aware. I mean, we only briefly spoke, but the idea is to focus on the 3 suggestions. Now it looks like the one. I'm beginning to understand more clearly Jeff's suggestions to always keep it as simple as possible, pick one thing. So very excited about moving forward with the multifamily EV charge station pilot project. I think that's effective, but we still have, and Lizzie, I'm not sure what, we did do this sort of overall outline of the zero emission transportation plan, and it has a lot of different things on it. Is that something, I mean, the committee member is just say, it's with you, staff, now go run and do it, but would there be maybe what we need to think of along the lines of having a completed plan is bringing that also to city council and saying, hey, we really need a consultant to take this and look at it in a bit more detail. I'd hate to, I kind of like to focus more on real tangible, hey, we got this many chargers installed, rather than saying we use DD funds to just create another plan of what to do.
I can chime in a little bit on that. Based on my conversations with Jeff, I think he thinks that it would be good to keep the plan as it exists now, essentially as a tool for the committee and for staff as we kind of move forward on these action items. And it doesn't necessarily need to be in a more kind of complete official space, at least for the moment. So I think that's at least Jeff's thinking on it.
Well, I'm encouraged to hear that. So we brought it to a place where everyone, I think, understood enough of where we were going, and now we want to go there. So that's all I have to update on that. And Eric, I don't know if you have anything.
Okay. Should we make a call for public comment?
Yeah, so if there are any members of the public who'd like to comment on item 6-6 subcommittee updates, please raise your hand in the Zoom.
Give it a couple seconds. No hands are raised. Back to you, Chair Chen.
Okie doke. So I think the last thing on the agenda is future agenda items. So if there are any agenda items that any members would like to bring forward, now is the time to do so. And just as a reminder, July is the last Climate Action Committee meeting we will have before the August recess. So it's doubly important to bring things up now.
I can share what I have in my notes thus far. Is another update on the multifamily charging pilot program, an analysis of a tree plan / program, and another discussion of, and presentation on analysis by Committee Member Peterson and Committee Member Larson on use of Measure DD funds for electric infrastructure incentives. I feel like I'm missing something. NEM. Thank you, Michelle.
What was the one you had, Eric and I sent it? That's sort of a larger issue of the Measure DD projects that we're bringing this issue before the council. So I didn't want to lose track that we wanted to actually agree to of what we're going to have someone present to the council.
Okay, so we'll have an agenda item dedicated to Measure DD proposal. Okay. Great.
Okie doke. Anything else?
If we have any members of the public with thoughts. At this time, if you're a member of the public and you want to request a future agenda item, please raise your hand. Not seeing any hands raised. Back to you, Chair Chen.
Okay, so I think that's everything. Yeah, I guess let's adjourn the meeting.
Right.
Thank you all. Oh, Committee Member Peterson?
Well, I was just going to say, good job, Chair Chen and Vice Chair Merchant. Thank you very much. Hopefully you didn't feel like Eric and I railroaded you into that, but if we didn't plan that ahead. But thank you. It's great.
Thanks.
Good job.
Good. See ya.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.